Hey y'all, I'm Tara Shaver with AARP's Office of Volunteer Engagement, and you're listening to The Roost, the place for all things volunteer. Today, I am here with Jenn Baier, who is working with the census as part of a special assignment with AARP. Jenn, welcome to The Roost.
Thank you so much.
So Jenn, tell me a little bit about what you've been doing for the last several months as part of this special assignment.
Sure. So AARP really got involved because the ultimate goal is to have as many people as possible participate in the 2020 census. And before I took this job, I didn't realize just how much money can come to your local community because of the census. It is $675 billion a year for programs in your own community. And that includes aging programs, which is why AARP has really gotten involved. So I've been very busy working across the association with all of our different departments to make sure we're getting the word out, helping people know how to take the census, when to take the census, protect themselves from frauds and scams, and to let people know about those 500,000 job opportunities with the Census Bureau. So we've been busy.
Well, as you know, you really got my attention when I heard your pitch at the Central Region meeting back in December, which is why I asked you to do this episode. I think the census numbers are something that we're all accustomed to referencing and seeing in our work. And we know for those of us who've done grant administration and things like that, we're accustomed to those numbers being used for formulas and for funding. But what really also caught my attention was when you were talking about the groups that are often underrepresented and maybe don't even get the outreach that they need in order to know that they should be replying to the census. They don't know how easy it is. There are just a lot of misconceptions. And so I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that, but also about what are some of the roles that our state offices and that our volunteers can play in helping make sure that their communities are represented and that their numbers and that they are counted.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack here. So the people that you're referring to, the people that often don't get counted, are referred to as the hard to count populations. And that oftentimes falls into rural areas in the United States where the money is needed for things like transportation and road work and rural clinics and waste removal and community grants. And if a community has a large group of people who are missed, those dollars aren't going to go to their community. They're going to go to another community. So we want to make sure that all of our rural members and the 50 plus at large know how important it is to take the census. And frankly, in rural communities, we're sort of used to pulling our bootstraps up and taking matters into our own hands. And so there's things we can do this census that have been different in years past. So if we don't get a letter in the mail inviting us to participate, or if we have a P.O. box and somebody has stuck a reminder on our door and it's blown away or it's been lost in a blizzard, there are things we can do in rural communities to go ahead and just participate right on our own.
Yeah, so we were talking about this before we started today, and you were telling me that this is the first time ever that we've been able to be this proactive and do, I believe you said telephone and web. So tell me about that. What does that look like? What kind of considerations maybe have the census people also thought of to help protect our information or to make sure that, that everything is on the up and up as people
Sure.
have this freedom to be proactive?
Yeah, so this is the first census that will be able to be taken online. So always in the past, it's been a paper form, right? You received a paper form in the mail or when somebody knocked on your door. So let's go through timelines first. Around March 12th to the 20th, 95% of folks will get an invitation in the mail to take the census. They can either go online or they can call in. If you don't receive a paper copy right away, because the Census Bureau is trying to be good stewards of finances, not everybody gets a paper copy right away. I live in an area that has pretty good broadband. I'm not going to get a paper copy on the first go round. If I really want a paper copy, I just have to wait. I literally have to do nothing. So how often do you hear that? Just do nothing. So I will wait March 16th to the 24th. A reminder letter will come. I'll pitch it in the garbage. March 26th to April 3rd, a reminder postcard will come. If I am determined that I'm going to take that census by paper, I'm going to throw that in the garbage. And then April 8th to the 16th, finally, a paper copy will arrive to everybody in the mail. So know that if you are a paper person and you want to take that by a paper, it is still absolutely a possibility. Also, you can call in. So if you feel more comfortable talking to somebody. This is also the very first census where when you call in, if English is not your first language, they will be able to support you in 13 languages, and they will have guides for 59 more languages. So they're really focusing on getting people to participate. And I think you asked me about fraud too, so we can talk about that next.
Wow, that's a lot of language option. That
There
is
are
amazing.
lots of options. Go to their
Yeah.
website. I've never seen something quite this cool. If you go to 2020census.gov, they have a little language bar up in the top right corner, and you can drop down. I've never seen some of these languages before, and you can their whole website will morph into that language with beautiful pictures from different regions of the world or different regions of the country in different languages. It's really fascinating.
That is so cool. And we had a laugh because, you know, these are the kinds of jobs you don't think about often when it's not time for them. And I think we were having lunch and I said, what do the census people do in the 10 years between the census? Now we know they are creating websites in 60 different languages
Right.
and tip sheets for those. So that's a lot of work that goes into it. We know it's amazing if we see something just in English and in Spanish. So that is absolutely awesome.
It is a truly multicultural effort this time around. And they've just placed advertisements too across the country in 13 languages, radio, TV, buses, places where people gather. They're estimating that they're going to hit 99% of the population in one way, shape, or form, at least to raise awareness.
Yeah, that's so awesome. I'm so glad AARP gets to be a part of this. And even just through what we're doing right now to help folks who maybe, you know, haven't been directly involved with our work through their relationships with you, just to hear some of the ways that we, even as individuals, can get involved. And I know I'm a volunteer in my community, and I always try to share information like this through my neighborhood Facebook pages and through when people have a question or they think something's a scam. I'm always like being that ambassador to go in and link to some of our resources since we are a
Yeah.
trusted source. So tell me a little bit about, you know, the fraud issues that that are of concern and what is happening to try to address those issues, and if there's anything special that we're doing to help with that with our
Yeah.
fraud work.
Yeah, let's talk about fraud, and then let's go back to what AARP is doing in the community at the very, very local level, because there's some really cool examples of how volunteers are getting involved, how AARP state offices are getting involved, but let's talk fraud. So number one thing to know is that the Census Bureau is going to be contacting almost everybody by mail, 95% of us. If we don't have a mailbox or are not, you know, or off the grid, the Census Bureau is going to be sending in-person enumerators. If I self-respond during the self-response period, March 12th to about May 8th, great. If I don't, a census worker may knock on my door. And this is where there's some opportunities for fraud that AARP wants you to be aware of. So first thing you need to know is that Census Bureau workers will have a Census Bureau badge. That badge will have a watermark with the Department of Commerce on it. They should be carrying census branded bags and laptops and things like that. If you're concerned that a census worker doesn't look legitimate, you can call local law enforcement on a non-emergency line if you have one. The Bureau also at their website will have maps. This is the very first time they're able to do this, that show, is there supposed to be a census worker in your area today? So your local law enforcement will be able to double check on that. Things that Census Bureau workers will never ask you: your social security number or your bank account number. Now, that seems common sense, but we reel this information off quickly. So let's say somebody comes to your door, they've managed to get a Census Bureau worker bag. They go through the 9 questions. That's all the 2020 census is, 9 quick questions. And that you're reeling off the answers, right? You know, what's your name? How long, you know, what's your age? How many people live in your household? What's your social security number? You've got to stop and think, no, this is not a real census worker, and close that door and call local law enforcement. So just be aware, the census is never going to ask you that information. And they're never going to fine you. They're never going to say, if you don't fill this out right now, there's $100 fine. So if you're feeling that way, it's probably a scammer. Resource-wise, AARP has some great tip sheets on the census scams and frauds and keeping yourself and your family safe that you can be distributing at aarp.org/census. So scroll down there and you'll see the fact sheets. You can print them out, take them to your community groups, take them to your family, and let everybody know to just be aware, because it's so important to participate, but AARP wants you to participate safely.
Yeah, that is such a great thing to have access to those resources online. Like you said, they print cleanly and neatly, but they're also great to just quickly link if you see some buzz about that happening on social media, or, heck, ask people to put it in your church newsletter, or,
Yeah,
in some of these, the community organizations that do regular emailing and things like that. Like, we can all do our part just as good citizens,
yeah.
to help educate our neighbors. And that, I don't think we've talked about this yet. So, tell me a little bit about, you said the 9 questions are simple, and people who maybe are a little mistrusting of government. I know we have that in a lot of
Sure.
different ways. I know
Yeah,
it's a big deal in my area because we are
yeah,
very rural, and that
absolutely.
folks are just a little suspicious about, what are those questions? And if I'm, in trouble or think I might have done something
Sure.
wrong, and is this how people are going to come after me and
Yeah,
shake the naughty stick at me, or how is this information used, just so we
yeah.
can put people's minds at ease? And what's an easy way to say that to folks when you might be doing some of that outreach in the community?
Yep. So the information is absolutely kept confidential. A census worker swears an oath that they will not share your information with anybody. If they break that oath, they can be fined thousands of dollars, and they can also face jail time. So that's one thing to know, is that the Bureau is taking this very, very seriously. The other thing to know is that your information cannot be shared with anybody, and it will be uh, conglomerated, put into part of a whole, right? So you'll never be personally identifiable. So know that. And the other thing that we're telling people is, while we encourage you to fill out all 9 questions, the Bureau will take any information that they're given. So if there's a question that really makes you uncomfortable, while I'm saying absolutely fill it out fully, if you skip a question, the data that you do provide will still be leveraged. So just know that as you're facing those 9 questions.
Yeah, that's really good to know, because as we know, that's not always the case. Sometimes if you skip one, the whole thing is tossed out. So that's awesome to
And
know.
that's the other thing we should talk about real quick too. We're still getting questions on this. So early in the year, it was early last year, there was a big debate about whether there would be a question, are you a citizen of the United States of America? That question has been thrown off. The Supreme Court ruled it cannot be on the census. So just note it's not there.
Great. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Okay, let's talk about what we're doing in
Yeah.
states and communities. You were telling me before we started recording here that there were some states doing some really cool things, and that a lot of these things are easily replicable, and some ideas that some of our folks who maybe hadn't considered doing, having their volunteers be more involved, could take the opportunity to do, especially as we're gearing up for like our busy spring and summer.
Yeah, this is where the real heart of the work is, going local into your communities. This is my favorite part of the job. So we've got state offices in every state in the country, and they're doing some really cool census outreach with partners and volunteers. So if you're interested in the census and you're not already working with your state office, this may be an opportunity to approach them and say, hey, I'm really interested in this. There's a ton of resources that I've heard about. Could you help me see where they are? So we've created an entire suite of resources to use in the community: flyers and handouts, a 30-minute presentation, a 60-minute presentation, a couple of videos if people want to show them, 2 or 3 minutes long, on importance of taking the census, all those census jobs, and the frauds and scams, and keeping yourself safe. So know that there's a suite of resources to take to the people that you know best. So let me tell you what some of our state offices are doing. So I just heard about this in Connecticut the other day. One of the biggest ways to get out into the community is through complete count committees, which are formed, grassroots movement all over the country, formed by supported by the Census Bureau, but really formed locally. So there are thousands of complete count committees or commissions forming. And so you can be on one of those. You can look them up at the Census Bureau website, and you can join your local complete count committee. So AARP volunteers and staff across the country are joining complete count committees. Those committees are charged with coming up with a plan for how they will reach the hardest to count groups in their community when the census opens up in March. So you can join one of those. Our Connecticut office actually formed their own complete count committee with State Director Nora Duncan at the helm. And so they are partnering with the AAAs. They are targeting which areas are going to be the hardest to count in their local communities. And they've got some ideas for going to churches with populations that may be missed, African-American populations, and other hard to count. So AARP volunteers who are already part of those churches or other community events will be there, and they're going to partner with the Bureau, and they're going to bring enumerators, which are the people who count, and help people fill out the questionnaire if they want assistance. They're going to bring them together and actually fill the questionnaires out together to make sure that those people are counted. So that's Connecticut. In New York, they're actually starting to talk about, these hard to count communities. When you think of New York, you think it's very, very urban, but there's a lot of subgroups of folks who English might not be the first language, or there's a mistrust of the government. And we've got volunteers who are able to bridge that gap as a trusted community ambassador. So they're talking about taking the AARP DIY, do it yourself kits and speaking with those groups and raising awareness and making sure to connect them to the language guides and things so that people feel confident about taking the census. I've heard from Michigan today, they're partnering with sorority groups in African-American neighborhoods. They're partnering with local boys and girls clubs to hold census parties and make sure that people know about the importance of taking the census and getting counted. Their volunteers are going to go and make sure that people have a safe space, a bank of iPads where they can actually take the census, and AARP volunteers will be standing by to take questions with our resources and help people if they have any concerns about any questions. Why is this question there? What should I do? And things like that. So it's all over the country. We're going local like that. We're partnering with elected officials, having teletown halls, spreading the word, but we're also really helping people fill out the census. They have to do it themselves. I do want to be clear. You should not be filling it out for them in any way, shape, or form, but they're providing guidance and making sure that people know how important it is to be counted. So cool work happening across the states.
Yeah, you just made me think of just a few ways that I need to make sure I connect you with some of our team as when we're done here.
Yeah.
And the one that came to mind because of, I remember you saying that one of the groups that were sometimes difficult to count were like people in assisted living or nursing homes or in residential care facilities of all kinds.
Yeah.
And that, our chapters often already do service projects and things with these facilities. That what a great light touch, easy ask thing for us to ask some of our, our folks who maybe have been with us for a long time but aren't super involved in the rest of the work of the state offices. What a great thing to offer for them as a way to really serve their community.
Yeah, and people who are, and that's one thing where we can be an advocate, because nursing homes, assisted living facilities, colleges, they're each counted as sort of a group living situation. And so one of the things you can do if you have a loved one who is in an assisted living, or if you're in assisted living yourself, is go to your administrator and say, how is my community going to be counted? In some cases, the Bureau is already in contact with that administrator, and the administrator will submit a group form. In other cases, if it's independent living, it's really up to you to fill out the census form in your mail. So be talking, say, have you connected with the Census Bureau? Do you know how we're going to be counted here? For the most part, they've already made those connections, but it never hurts to check and see and make sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is such a wide variety across the country of the way facilities are managed and run and qualified and everything else.
Especially when you're in rural communities, right? I mean, you don't want to be missed.
Yeah, for sure. And gosh, this is just the ideas coming to mind about how much work we've done with caregivers and caregiver outreach. And
yeah. We should talk about that too.
Yeah, go for it.
Brand new, it'll be up on the website soon at aarp.org/census. But this is one of the places where AARP really partnered with the Census Bureau to reach caregivers. We've got a new flyer that's coming out in English and Spanish. We'll probably translate it into a few more languages, but that was something that nobody was talking about. I'm a caregiver for my grandmother. She lives in independent living, but she has some challenges with writing and things. Should I fill out the census for her? And so AARP was really able to create a flyer to give guidance on that. perhaps you and your grandmother or mother call the Census Bureau together and give those answers, or perhaps she speaks the answers to you and you fill out the form. But AARP is the one organization that's talking about that and has the sort of flyer and guides that'll be out soon. So check for it on the website in a couple of days.
I love it. Well, Jenn, we've talked about so much. What else is on your mind? I know one thing was that we already have the phone number to be able to
We do.
call. Remind
Yes.
us of the dates. Let's give that phone number and make sure that folks have access to that.
Yeah.
And then just if anything else comes to mind that you want to share that we haven't touched on,
Yeah.
let's do that.
All right, perfect. Yes, so the phone number. This phone number won't go active until March. So if you call it now and nobody answers, that is why. But this will be the number that you'll be able to call in and give your response on the census. It's 1-844-330-2020. So that's the actual number that you'll be able to call in and phone in your nine questions if you're not feeling like you want to go online or do paper copy. So that's good to
Awesome.
know. Yeah.
I'll give the Southern translation for that phone number. It's 844-330-2020, just for our Southern listeners, just to make sure we're clear.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And the other things, I think a couple things we haven't talked about real quick are, what do I do? This is the specific scenarios. What do I do if I live in Wisconsin for half of the year and I live in Florida for half of the year? Where should I fill out the census? Because the address I list is where the money is going to go. So rule of thumb is fill out the census where you reside most of the year. Because if you're spending most of your time there and you're going to need services in your community, you want them to be where you are most of the time. If you spend somewhere absolutely half of the time somewhere and half of the time somewhere else, count where you are on April 1, which is the official census day. So this applies also to children who may have shared custody. So you should be talking with your ex
That
or
can be
your
a
partner.
challenge.
Yeah, just to decide who's counting the kids, because the kids under the age of 5 are the most missed group in the country, because the mailer arrives and it says how many people live here, and you're like, oh, well, me and my husband live here, and you don't think to count them because they're little kids. But somebody needs to count them. And let's say that you miss your 5-year-old. That means that funding for your 5-year-old school, you won't have another opportunity until they're 15. So they've just gone from kindergarten to high school with no funding for their schools. So don't miss the kids. And if grandparents are raising grandchildren, be talking. Who's counting the kids? If they're with you most of the time, they absolutely count on your census. So keep it in mind.
And that's not relevant to actual guardianship, right? Because we know that's sometimes an issue. Like,
Nope.
so if the kid lives with you, even if you don't have official custody,
That's right.
and just to communicate if there are other caretakers involved, to know that they're not
Mhm.
being counted twice.
Yeah, everybody counts. Yep.
Gosh. Well, I will say that time again was April 1st, and that's no fooling. There's our fun pun for today.
I know. I wish that the Census Bureau, I asked them about this. I was like, April 1st?
Really?
Like, couldn't you have picked a different day? But yeah, it's no joke.
Yeah, I know. It would, to keep it all easy, it should have just been tax day, right? Wherever you were on tax day could be a convenient marker.
That's solving the world's problems.
Oh my God, I know. One day when people just do what we say, we'll be so happy. Well, Jenn, what else have we not talked about here? Either something that AARP is doing, or if you want to give those resources again, how do we want to wrap things up?
Sure. I think just visit aarp.org/census for those resources. We keep updating it. We've got the timeline on there when you should be looking for the mailer. We've got some videos on why it's important. We've got some fact sheets. If you're interested in applying for a job, the Census Bureau is absolutely still taking applications. It takes a hot second to hire 500,000 people. So they have their hands full. If you've already applied and you haven't gotten a response back yet, so you can apply at 2020census.gov/jobs. If you have done that already and you haven't heard back, go online, check your online profile, but also give them a little bit of space. Your profile will say if you're still a candidate, but they are receiving 25,000 applications a day. And in order to hire 500,000 people to start knocking on doors, they have to build a pool of like 2.5 million. So this is a gigantic undertaking, and I do know that they've started to staff their, their field managers and things like that, and then in turn those people are able to make calls out to people who are going to be potential enumerators. The training, if you're hired, is paid, so that's good to know, and the pay rates are pretty decent as well, ranging from $14 to $30 an hour depending on where you live in the country. So it's a great way to have a temporary job, flexible hours, part-time. The Census Bureau tells us that our members that we're sort of sending their way are really great census workers because they've lived in their communities for a long time. So if they go knock on a door, they're likely to get somebody to open that door, whereas a stranger definitely would not. So
Yeah, that's great. And I was just talking with a friend about this week, and one of the things that we also liked was that that it is close to home, right? They're not sending you to Timbuktu to
no.
knock on doors. They're going to keep you close to your community where you're familiar with the area, you're familiar
Yep.
with the people, those
Yep.
kinds of things.
Yep.
Great. Well, it has been amazing. If anyone is listening or watching and you have a story you want to tell about how your volunteers have been involved, please shoot me a message. Let me know. Would love to get you on. And Jenn, thank you so much for being with us. I know you've got tons of stuff that you're working on, especially as that launch date comes closer to us. So if there is anything new or evolving that you want to talk about, be sure to give me a shout.
I will.
Thank you all for listening or for watching, and we'll see you next time.